Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Cooking with Grandma. Today we are going to be making steak cups. These are pretty easy to make. You take a pound or two of hamburger depending on how many people you want to serve. You season it well with salt and pepper and mix it all in. Mix it all up nice and good. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take a cupcake tin and you're going to line each one with a small amount of hamburger, enough to fill it in, about, a ball about this size, a nice sized meatball. You're going to put it in the muffin tins. My brain is not working today. Rainy day, wants to sleep. You're going to put it in, you're going to fill it all in and push it up all around the top. And you're going to do this until they're all filled up. So there, I'll give you an idea. There's a couple of them right there. That's how they look. You just keep going until they're all filled. 1 pound of hamburger, or 1.5 pounds, should get you 12 of these. You can serve these with mashed potatoes, rice, spaghetti. It doesn't matter. Whatever side you like to choose, you go ahead and use it. So we're going to keep filling these up. And then after that, what you do is you can use fresh tomatoes. This is not the season for fresh tomatoes around here in Ontario, so I'm going to use canned tomatoes. And you can buy them already stewed and already seasoned. You can do that, but the ones I bought, for some reason, are they're just plum tomatoes. They were whole, so I had to cut them up. They weren't already pre-cut tomatoes, so that's okay. We'll just make do. And what you're going to do now, there, we've got all my cups lined. Now that wasn't quite a pound, and it got me 6, 8, 9. I probably could do 10 if I take a little burger out of each one. You don't want them real thick. You don't want, you want to be able to, you don't want them thin so they, fall apart when they're cooking and then there's nothing left to eat, but you don't want them overly thick because then that just takes more cooking time. So there's pretty much, that's what they look like. All in there, all lined up in your muffin tins. So now to each one of those, if you want, this part is strictly optional. If you're not an onion fan, you don't have to. You take an onion slice. I just sliced an onion real thin, just like that. It comes apart, but that's okay. And you put that down in the bottom of your steak cups. Steak, hamburger, it's ground steak, right? It's the same idea. Play on words a little bit. So we're going to put that. Now you can leave this out if you don't. I usually do some with and some without. There are some people that may not necessarily want onions on their in their food. That's okay. It doesn't matter. It just gives it a little extra flavor, but it doesn't hurt it to omit it. It does not do any damage to omit it. So we're there. So there they are. That's what they look like with the oven. Now we're going to set these aside for a moment. Wipe my hands off after handling the beef. So now what we have to do is make a roux. You know how to do that. That's the same thing you would make if you were making cheese sauce or cream sauce. Let me get my pot over here. There we go. Line that up so you can see good. So in our pot, we're going to put 4 tablespoons of butter. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we're going to melt the butter down. This is just like what you would make for a white sauce or a cheese sauce. You melt butter, you add flour. In this case, you're not adding milk because you're not making a sauce. You're just making, it's called a roux, it's a thickener. So you put the butter in there and you let it melt, and then you do the same. It's always the same amount, 4 tablespoons of butter versus flour. How much ever you want to make, you always have equal parts of butter and flour. So we're going to put the 4 tablespoons of flour in. And you want to mix this with a whisk so it gets smooth. Turn my oven on there so we can pop these in after. This is a very simple recipe, very easy. It's not that time consuming. You know, you thaw up the hamburger, you cut up the tomatoes if they're fresh or if they're canned, either way. If you don't have already cut up small. So there, look it, that took like 2 seconds. So we're going to turn the heat down just a little. There it is. There's your roux. That's what it looks like. Let's see. There. That's what it looks like. Melted flour, and basically that's just going to be a thickening agent. And to that you add your can of tomatoes with the juice. You want the liquid. Put those in there. Oh, goodness gracious. Oh boy, knock the camera right crooked. There we go. Give that a good stir. And you just want to stir these and simmer them. Cook them over the low heat until it thickens. It's going to take like 12 seconds, really. Just keep stirring though, because the flour will stick to the bottom. Okay, and you're going to add a tablespoon of sugar to this, only because sometimes the tomatoes can be a little on the bitter side. It doesn't always work that way, but sometimes they do. Okay, so there it is. It's thickened up nicely. It's all mixed in. And there you just made stewed tomatoes. Easy peasy. We're going to put that aside. Put my flour away. And now we're going to bring back our muffin tins with our hamburger mixture. And what you do now is you take a tablespoon of this and put it on top of each hamburger cup that you've made. Just fill up each one. Now, like, obviously if you're making more than a dozen or so, you need more hamburger and you need more of the tomatoes. It's just keep adding more, that's all. It's the same thing. You just would make another roux and you'd cut up some more tomatoes. Now I have just enough for the 9 or 10 rather that I got. I will be making another batch because 10's not enough for us for supper. We all here eat about 4 of these at once. They're so good. So there you go. Now to that, you're going to put on croutons. You can buy croutons already made, or you can simply make your own, which is very, very simple. This is a really good way to use up your stale bread. I have some bread here. You butter both sides of the bread, just like this. I've got it in a stack, 4 high. That's good. And I've buttered the insides already. I've already done that. So we're going to butter this side. It's a little messy on your cutting board, but it's okay. Washes off. And then you're going to cut them. You're going to get your bread knife and you're going to cut them into cubes. Just right down. And that is as easy it is to make cute croutons. These are going to crisp up in the oven. You're going to turn the bread. You see I cut it this way in rows. There we go. Now you turn your bread this way, and you can see how I've got the strips. So now you cut it again this way. And while you do that, that makes your cubes. And they're all relatively the same size. You want to keep them that way. You want to slice down evenly so they're all the same size. And there are what are going to be croutons very soon, because when you put them, they're bread right now. When you toast them, they become croutons. There it is. Easy as that. So then you take your steak cups, and to each one you top with the breadcrumbs. You can put as few or as many as you want. I usually cover the whole thing, and they get nice and crispy. And that's your topping. So there is steak cups. So it is a pound or 2 of hamburger, 1 can or 2 cups of freshly chopped tomatoes. You make a roux with 4 tablespoons of butter and 4 tablespoons of flour. Add your tomatoes, salt and pepper. And if you're using canned tomatoes, be very careful adding salt because they usually come very salted already. So taste them first, and if you need more salt, okay. But canned tomatoes are salty, so you don't want to add more salt to those. So then, and if you're using fresh, then you add salt and pepper. And you make it, you make your roux, you thicken up the butter and the flour. You put your tomatoes, salt and pepper in there, stir it till it's thick, which took all of like 10 seconds, and then scoop it into your little steak cups and top it with either store-bought or homemade croutons. Bread croutons are simple. You saw me just make them in a minute. And there you go. There are steak cups. So now these go in the oven and they bake for 30 to 35 minutes depending on the size, like how big, how deep it is. So I'm going to put them in the oven and I'll see you back here in about 25 minutes because I find 25 is usually good enough. Okay, welcome back, and we are done with the steak cups. They took about 25 minutes to cook. The recipe calls 30-35. I find they usually cook a little bit sooner. That's what they look like coming out of the oven. The croutons are nicely browned. So what you do is you take a knife and you just go around just like this. They won't stick because of the grease in the ground beef. And you put it on a plate, and there you have a steak cup. That's what's for dinner tonight. We're going to serve this with some rice tonight. Rice and some veggies. Now, one thing I did forget to mention, that when you're making them, if you're using canned tomatoes, you're good. Use the juice when you make your roux. When you melt your butter and your flour and you make your roux and you add the tomatoes out of the can, you put the juice. If you're using fresh tomatoes, if they're not real juicy, real watery, add a little bit of liquid, either tomato juice if you have it, or just some water. You don't want it real thin, but you want it to thicken up. The butter and the flour is going to thicken it, but you need that extra, you don't want it gloppy. You want it a little bit creamy. So there is what's for dinner tonight. Leave a comment below how you liked it, what you'd like to see me cook, what you'd like me to make, whether it's sweet or savory, breakfast, lunch, supper, snack, it doesn't matter, let me know. And hit the like button. Let's try to get to 20 likes for this video, okay, everybody? And you all have a super great, yummy, delicious day. Bye-bye.